I wasn't invited to my cousin's wedding because they said my attendance would stir up trouble, so I took a peaceful vacation. But now, the wedding has turned into a complete disaster, and suddenly everyone is calling me, begging me to help cover the costs. I, 32M, never thought a single wedding invitation could reveal so much about my family's true colors, but here we are. 3 months ago, I was living what I thought was a normal life, good job in tech, decent savings, and what I believed were solid family relationships. Then my cousin announced his engagement, and everything fell apart. The exclusion hit me like a freight train. My aunt called me on a Tuesday evening, her voice carrying that particular tone people use when they're about to deliver bad news wrapped in fake concern. She explained that my presence at the wedding might cause drama because of my recent divorce and some family tensions. Apparently, my ex-wife's family would be attending since she was friends with the bride, and they didn't want any awkwardness. What they didn't mention was that my ex had been spreading lies about me for months, painting me as some kind of unstable person who couldn't handle the divorce. The truth was far different. I'd caught her cheating with her boss and had simply asked for a clean split. No drama, no fights, just a quiet dissolution of a marriage that had clearly run its course. But somehow, in the family gossip mill, I'd become the villain. Standing in my kitchen that evening, phone still warm in my hand, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just about a wedding invitation. This was about respect, loyalty, and the realization that my own family had chosen sides without ever asking for my version of events. My cousin had been like a brother to me growing up. We'd built tree houses, shared secrets, and I'd even lent him money for his first car down payment. Money he still hadn't repaid, though I'd never pressed the issue. Now, he couldn't even extend me the courtesy of a conversation before writing me off entirely. The weeks that followed were eye-opening. Other family members started calling, each conversation revealing just how deep the conspiracy went. My uncle suggested I should understand that weddings are stressful and maybe it was better this way. My grandmother, usually my strongest supporter, gently recommended that I consider whether my presence might really cause problems. Even my own sister seemed hesitant when I brought up the topic, quickly changing the subject. I realized I'd been painted as the family problem child, and everyone had apparently agreed that excluding me was the path of least resistance. The casual cruelty of it was breathtaking. They weren't even trying to hide their decision or make it easier for me to swallow. It was just a fait accompli, delivered with the expectation that I'd quietly accept my exile. That's when I decided to take control of my own narrative. I'd been planning to attend the wedding anyway, had even bought a nice gift and new suit. Instead, I used the money I would have spent on the wedding gift to book myself a luxury vacation to Costa Rica. If my family wanted me gone for the weekend, I'd be gone, but on my own terms, living my best life while they dealt with whatever drama they were so worried about. The irony wasn't lost on me. They'd excluded me to avoid problems, but I wondered if they considered what problems might arise from their own choices. I posted a few strategic photos on social media, nothing obvious or petty, just beautiful sunset shots and pictures of me enjoying expensive dinners and adventures. The message was clear. I wasn't sitting at home feeling sorry for myself. I was thriving. The first call came on Friday afternoon, the day before the wedding. My phone buzzed with my aunt's number, but I was zip-lining through a rainforest canopy and let it go to voicemail. When I finally listened to the message hours later, her voice sounded strained. She asked if I could call her back, that there were some developments with the wedding arrangements. I didn't call back. Saturday morning brought a cascade of missed calls and increasingly frantic voicemails. My sister, my uncle, even my cousin himself left messages. Each one sounded more desperate than the last, but I was busy enjoying a peaceful morning on a pristine beach, finally feeling relaxed for the first time in months. It wasn't until Sunday evening, as I prepared for my flight home, that I finally listened to all the messages and pieced together what had happened. The wedding had been a complete catastrophe. It started with the venue. Apparently, my cousin had cut costs by booking a cheaper location that looked good in photos but hadn't properly disclosed their limitations. The power went out during the ceremony, leaving 150 guests sitting in sweltering heat with no air conditioning. The backup generator failed, and the venue's staff proved incompetent at managing the crisis. But that was just the beginning. The catering company had somehow double-booked their services and showed up 3 hours late with food for half the expected guests. The band didn't show up at all. Apparently, there had been a miscommunication about the date. The photographer turned out to be a scammer who took the deposit money and disappeared, leaving them with no professional photos of what was supposed to be the most important day of their lives. Even worse, the florist had mixed up orders, delivering funeral arrangements instead of wedding bouquets. My cousin's new bride apparently broke down completely when she saw the sympathy flowers, and the whole ceremony had to be delayed while someone drove across town to find replacement flowers at a grocery store. As if the universe had a sense of poetic justice, my ex-wife's family had their own drama. Her uncle got drunk and started a fight with another guest, leading to police being called. Several people ended up leaving early, including some of the bride's important relatives who were supposed to give speeches. The final insult came when the wedding cake collapsed during the reception. Apparently, the summer heat and lack of air conditioning had caused the elaborate multi-tier creation to literally melt and topple over, covering the head table in frosting and debris. My sister's voicemail painted a picture of chaos that would have been funny if it weren't so devastating for the couple. She described guests standing around in the heat, kids crying, elderly relatives needing medical attention, and the bride locked in a bathroom refusing to come out. The total cost of the disaster was staggering. Between the venue issues, the no-show vendors, and the emergency replacements they had to hire on the spot, the wedding had gone wildly over budget. My cousin and his new wife were looking at debts that would take years to pay off. And then came the part that made everything crystal clear. My aunt's latest voicemail was the most revealing. Through barely controlled tears, she explained that they needed help covering the unexpected costs. Several family members were being asked to chip in to help the couple avoid starting their marriage buried in debt. She mentioned that I'd always been generous with family and wondered if I might consider contributing, despite not being able to attend. The sheer audacity took my breath away. They'd excluded me to avoid drama, but now that their drama-free wedding had turned into a complete disaster, suddenly they remembered that I existed. Not to apologize for the exclusion, not to acknowledge how they'd treated me, but to ask for money. I sat in the airport departure lounge, watching planes taxi on the runway, and felt something I hadn't expected: complete clarity. For months, I'd been questioning myself, wondering if maybe I really was the problem, if my family's treatment of me had been justified somehow. But this request crystallized everything. They didn't see me as family. They saw me as a resource to be used when convenient and discarded when not. The flight home gave me hours to think about my response. Part of me wanted to laugh at the cosmic justice of it all. They'd worked so hard to avoid the drama they thought I'd bring, only to create far worse drama through their own poor planning and cheap decisions. Another part of me felt genuinely sad for my cousin, who, despite everything, was still family. But the biggest part of me felt free. I'd spent years walking on eggshells around family dynamics, trying to keep everyone happy, lending money I couldn't afford, attending every gathering, playing the role of the accommodating relative. The exclusion from the wedding had hurt, but it had also shown me exactly where I stood in their priorities. When I finally got home, I found 17 missed calls and a dozen text messages. The desperation was palpable. My uncle had even driven by my house, apparently thinking I might be there ignoring their calls. I took a hot shower, unpacked my luggage, and then sat down to craft my response. Update 1. The response I sent was simple and direct. I thanked them for thinking of me in their time of need, but explained that I was confused about why they would ask for financial help from someone whose presence at family events apparently causes problems and stirs up trouble. I mentioned that I hoped they understood why someone who wasn't considered important enough to invite to the wedding might not feel compelled to help clean up the aftermath. I kept it polite but firm. No name-calling, no detailed recounting of grievances, just a clear statement that their request didn't align with how they'd treated me. The reaction was swift and revealing. My aunt called within an hour, her voice switching between anger and pleading. She accused me of being petty and holding grudges, insisting that the wedding exclusion had been about preventing problems, not about my worth as a family member. When I calmly asked her to explain the difference, the conversation got heated quickly. She demanded to know why I couldn't just help family in need without making it about old hurt feelings. I asked her why the family's need for my money was more important than my need for basic respect and inclusion. The call ended with her hanging up on me. My sister tried a different approach, showing up at my door the next evening with takeout and wine, clearly planning to have a heart-to-heart that would end with me writing a check. She spent an hour explaining how stressed everyone was, how the young couple didn't deserve to start their marriage in debt, how families should support each other. I listened patiently and then asked her a simple question. When I was going through my divorce and dealing with all the lies being spread about me, where was this family support? When I was excluded from the wedding based on gossip and assumptions, where was her advocacy for me? She couldn't answer. The silence stretched between us until she finally admitted that maybe they'd handled things poorly. But couldn't I be the bigger person now? That phrase, be the bigger person, crystallized everything wrong with the family dynamic. I'd been the bigger person for years, swallowing slights, ignoring disrespect, lending money that wasn't repaid, and accommodating everyone else's comfort at the expense of my own dignity. Being the bigger person had gotten me excluded from family events and treated like an ATM. My cousin finally called me himself 3 days later. His voice was different, defeated, exhausted. He apologized for not inviting me, claiming he'd been pressured by others and had let stress cloud his judgment. He sounded genuinely remorseful, which made the conversation harder than the others. But then he started talking about the debt, about how they'd trusted the wrong vendors, about how everyone was asking them to just suck it up and deal with it. The implication was clear. I should help because I was in a position to do so, regardless of how they'd treated me. I told him I was sorry his wedding had been ruined, and I meant it. But I also told him that actions have consequences, and that excluding family members from important events while expecting their financial support afterward wasn't how healthy relationships work. He got quiet for a long moment, then asked if there was any way to fix this. I told him the truth. Trust, once broken, takes time and effort to rebuild. The exclusion had damaged our relationship, and asking for money immediately afterward had made it worse. Update 2. Word of my refusal to contribute spread through the family network faster than gossip about my divorce had. Suddenly, I was getting calls from relatives I hadn't heard from in years, each with their own angle on why I should reconsider. My grandmother called, her voice frail and disappointed. She talked about family loyalty and how the younger generation needed guidance and support from their elders. It was emotional manipulation of the highest order, wrapped in loving language that made it hard to resist. But I'd learned to recognize manipulation, even when it came from people I loved. I explained to her that loyalty works both ways, and that I'd been shown very clearly that my loyalty wasn't valued or reciprocated. She tried to argue that weddings are different, that they bring out stress and poor decisions in people, but couldn't explain why that stress didn't extend to treating all family members with basic respect. The most interesting call came from my ex-wife's sister, who had apparently heard about the situation through the family grapevine. She apologized for her family's role in creating the drama that had led to my exclusion, admitting that my ex-wife had been spreading exaggerated stories about our divorce. She explained that my ex had been dealing with guilt about the affair and had been deflecting by making me the villain in her narrative. The sister had tried to correct the record with some family members, but hadn't realized how far the lies had spread until the wedding situation exploded. It was vindicating, but also infuriating. My reputation had been damaged by lies. I'd been excluded from family events because of those lies, and now that the truth was coming out, everyone expected me to just move on as if nothing had happened. The pressure campaign continued for 2 weeks. Different family members took turns calling, texting, and even showing up at my work. The message was consistent. The young couple was suffering. I was in a position to help, and refusing to do so made me selfish and vindictive. But something had changed in me during those weeks in Costa Rica. For the first time in years, I'd felt completely free from family drama, expectations, and manipulation. I'd remembered what it felt like to make decisions based on my own values rather than trying to keep everyone else happy. The final straw came when my aunt started a group text with several family members, discussing my refusal to help as if I weren't included in the conversation. The messages painted me as cruel and money-obsessed, suggesting that I was punishing an innocent couple for other people's mistakes. Reading those messages, seeing how casually they discussed my character and motivations without any acknowledgement of their own behavior, made my decision final. I responded to the group text with a simple message. I was removing myself from family financial discussions permanently. Anyone who needed money from me in the future could first explain why someone whose presence causes family problems would be trusted with family financial responsibilities. Then I left the group chat. Update 3. 6 months have passed since the wedding disaster, and the aftermath has been more revealing than I could have imagined. My cousin and his wife ended up taking out a loan to cover their wedding debts. Several other family members contributed small amounts, but the bulk of the financial burden fell on them. I heard through my sister that they're struggling but managing, and that the experience taught them some hard lessons about budgeting and vendor research. More importantly, the family dynamic has shifted in ways that have actually been positive for me. Without the pressure to constantly accommodate everyone else's feelings, I've been able to establish clearer boundaries in all my relationships. I'm no longer the go-to person for family financial emergencies, which has freed me from a cycle of resentment and expectation that I hadn't even realized was unhealthy. My sister and I have actually grown closer. After the initial tension, she admitted that she'd always relied on me to be the accommodating one, which had allowed her to avoid difficult family conversations. We've started having more honest discussions about family dynamics, and she's begun setting her own boundaries with some of the more demanding relatives. The most surprising development came 3 months ago when my cousin called to genuinely apologize, not to ask for money or try to smooth things over for family harmony, but to actually acknowledge how his choices had affected me. He'd been in therapy with his wife, working through the stress and poor decisions that had led to both the wedding disaster and the way they'd treated family members. He couldn't undo the exclusion or the way they'd handled the aftermath, but he could acknowledge the harm and commit to doing better in the future. It wasn't a complete reconciliation, but it was the first genuine accountability I'd received from anyone in the family. Some relationships haven't recovered. My aunt and I barely speak now, and several relatives have made it clear that they view my refusal to help as unforgivable selfishness. But I've realized that relationships built on my willingness to absorb disrespect while providing financial support weren't healthy relationships to begin with. The most unexpected outcome has been how this experience changed my approach to dating. When I started seeing someone new a few months ago, I was upfront about my family situation and the boundaries I'd established. Instead of being put off, she was impressed by my willingness to stand up for myself and maintain my principles even when it was difficult. She pointed out something I hadn't fully realized. The family members who were angriest about my refusal to contribute were the same ones who had been most comfortable with excluding me. The pattern revealed who saw me as a person worthy of respect versus who saw me as a resource to be managed. Looking back, I don't regret my decision. The wedding disaster wasn't my fault, and cleaning up after it wasn't my responsibility. My family created their own drama while trying to avoid the drama they assumed I'd bring, and that irony wasn't lost on anyone paying attention. I've learned that sometimes the most peaceful response to family chaos is simply to remove yourself from it. My Costa Rica vacation was the best money I've ever spent, not just because I enjoyed the trip, but because it gave me the distance I needed to see my family dynamics clearly. The cousin who once borrowed money for a car and never repaid it, who excluded me from his wedding to avoid problems, who then asked me to help pay for the disaster that followed. He learned that actions have consequences. The family members who were comfortable with my exclusion but outraged by my financial boundaries learned that you can't have it both ways. And I learned that standing up for yourself, even when it's uncomfortable and even when family pressure is intense, is sometimes the only way to maintain your dignity and self-respect. The wedding disaster that was supposed to happen because of my presence happened anyway, in spectacular fashion, without me there at all. But the real disaster would have been if I'd continued to accept disrespect while subsidizing the people who showed it to me. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's simply refusing to participate in your own mistreatment. 6 months later, I'm happier, my boundaries are clearer, and my relationships are more honest. The family members who matter most have either respected my position or worked to rebuild our relationships on more equal terms. As for the rest, they're welcome to their opinions about my selfishness and lack of family loyalty. I'll be too busy living my life with dignity and self-respect to lose much sleep over it.